I'm Doug Schoelles, pastor and a board member with Lutheran CORE. And today I'm going to be talking about the curriculum that was put out by the ELCA's Lutheran Outdoor Ministries called Created to Be. It is connected to the teaching material that is being used for the ELCA Youth Gathering. The material is rife with social justice works righteousness, with an emphasis upon what are you doing. And it is all about encouraging children that God has created them to be their free, authentic selves, whatever that means, and to be brave, disruptive change makers. Now, the stated focus of the material is each of our 5 sessions gives us an opportunity to explore more deeply the authentic selves God has created us to be. And that phrase, authentic self, is very much hip and prevalent in our culture, but it is not a biblical identity. It's not a biblical phrase. It really is what you've created yourself to be without reference to God. Now, one of the things is there is a strong undercurrent of DEI, or otherwise known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. Race and gender are referenced a few times. Also, of course, the LGBTQ++ communities, and they talk about how, anyone that's been put aside because of who they love. That phrase gets used a couple of different times. And, when it talks about how God has made us exactly who we are right now, and that's who God has intended us to be. This is a encouragement to the LGBTQ agenda. But then, does this mean that God plans for me to be greedy as I am, to be promiscuous, to be a liar? What are the barriers on this? And so one of the things is that there's a real emphasis upon the solidarity of social justice causes. It wants to encourage them to be disciples who are brave enough to encourage and stand up for each other, and that God sees us like no other and meets us where we are to walk beside us. There's no language about how God might transform us from being sinners. Now, most of the references of sin are about how people are the victims of societal sins. There's little discussions about our own depraved hearts or cravings. So jumping into this, the first lesson is on that we're created to be free, but there's no reference to what we're supposed to be free from, right? There's no mention of being free from sin and rebellion and death. And there's certainly not a reference at all in any of the material to Satan or the devil. It talks about how we are created to do the good works that God has already prepared for us, not that we are freed from sin because we are created to live in a relationship with God and created for His praise and for His purposes. And so, in fact, there's not one word about worshiping God and being in relationship with God and obedience to God. We are told that we are loved by God, but no reference to why God loves us or how it is that God loves us. There's a few references to the cross of Christ, but it's never used as the jumping off point for understanding how God loves us. One of the statements there is that we are already good enough for God's love, and we don't need to prove anything to God in order to receive grace. And the whole idea, we're already good enough. What about sin, right? He also talks about how we're all worthy of God's freedom and mercy. That line is in there. But we're not worthy of God's freedom and mercy. We deserve God's judgment. Mercy and freedom come through God's grace, through God. It's a gift from God. One of the activities is a justice auction, and about how God enables us to end world hunger and homelessness or war, which, considering that great amounts of money and blood have been spent to try to take care of those things, doesn't seem like human beings have accomplished that yet. One of the other activities is a freedom parade to march for a cause, to make signs for use in that parade, and carrying the signs around the camp. And the parade could be, as they suggest, for world hunger or peace, world peace, or so on. And so, I don't know that I want to send my kid to camp to learn how to be a social justice warrior when I can send him to an Ivy League school, right? The next lesson, created to be authentic. The line here is, God recognizes and cherishes our true selves. Well, my true self outside of Jesus is that I'm a sinner, right? They go on. We don't need to change who we are to fit some person's or some group's ideal. God created us to be our individual selves. And again, this whole idea that God enables us to be our authentic selves, and that's the image that God intends. There's no reference to what impact sin has on this identity. One of the things they even ask is, what do they even mean by authentic self? Outside of Jesus Christ, our only authentic self is selfish and sinful. And actually, according to the gospel, we're supposed to lose our authentic self, our sinful self, so that we may become the children of God. And one of the misstatements in the passage, or in this material, it says, in the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul talks about the value and importance of our unique, God-given authenticity. And, the author is conflating God's gifts for the works of ministry with our authenticity. And they're not the same thing, and it's a misinterpretation. It goes on, the next lesson is about created to be brave, with an emphasis upon David and Goliath. One of the things they ask the question, what is a Goliath that you want to face bravely? And the references they give are to bullying, sexism, racism, and various sins, but not really an emphasis upon what are the sins within our own life that we might be facing. There's a lesson on created to be disciples. It's not bad. And then comes the last one, created to be change makers. Now, in the National Gathering material, the language there is created to be disruptive, and that was the original language in this material, but it was changed. And one of the lines there is, in today's world, what are some examples of disruption? And it talks about a protest rally or march for peace, speaking up for someone who's excluded, inspiring others to take care of the planet, advocating for fair practices in hiring or getting a loan or voting, which I'm sure is on every 12-year-old's mind about how they can be involved in helping people get a loan. What's interesting is I'm sure that there's other activities that these politically left Christians would find very upsetting, and they would say, no, you're not supposed to be disruptive in that way. One of the things throughout the material is that the word Father, referring to God as Father, it does happen, but not in any of the prayers. It's sort of just we have to put up with it because it's in the Lord's Prayer kind of thing. But instead they revert to modalism. As a whole, it's just the continued emphasis upon the ELCA's social justice, works righteousness teaching, which emphasizes the human being over our worship and relationship and our obedience to God. Thanks, friends. I hope this is helpful for you.